Welcome to the Queer Spirit Podcast. I'm your host, Nick Venegoni. Here we have conversations with artists, healers, and activists who enliven the LGBTQ communities and who empower our queer spirits to flourish. When I first started my podcast last year, I had no idea that there was another entity out there with a similar name. The Queer Spirit Festival is a biannual event in England. And although it is not affiliated with the Queer Spirit podcast, we both acknowledge that queer spirit is shared among all queer people. My guests today are Al Head and Shokti, the producers of the Queer Spirit Festival. Now in its third year, the Queer Spirit Festival will be held August 14th through 18th in Northamptonshire, England. It's 5 days of community, pleasure, play, and enrichment for body, mind, and soul. Al Head is a pagan energy worker who has been an LGBT activist and organizer since the early 1980s, as well as a peace, environmental, and inclusion activist. They are also the author of Queer Deity, Sacred Slut. Shokti is a spiritual activist and Faerie Witch. He is one of the crew who worked to birth Folleterre Radical Faerie Sanctuary in France, and who brought fairy gatherings to the UK in 2006. Shokti is the workshop programmer for the Queer Spirit Festival, bringing together dozens of facilitators and activists working on the cutting edge of queer community and consciousness. Today they share with us more about the festival and its origins in the queer pagan communities of the UK. Shokti shares about his desire to bring forth the spiritual inheritance of queer people, and Al talks about teaching sex magic to groups to help heal the earth. For more info about the festival, go to queerspirit.net. Hi, Al and Shokti. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Well, thank you.
Hi.
So I thought I would have you each start out by introducing yourselves a little bit and sharing more about your own queer spiritual path. Shokti, would you like to begin?
Okay, thank you, Nick. Very nice of you to have us along here. I'm pleased to get to speak to everybody today. I'm Shokti of London town, but originally a small town boy from the English countryside, went to university studying history, came out, a classic 1980s small town boy story, ran to London looking for pleasure, joy, love, found all those things, of course, but also I was arriving there at the height of the AIDS, or the start of the AIDS crisis, really. Within a few years, found myself wrapped up within that journey, diagnosed HIV positive at 25, which was 1990, the height of the dying times. But this turned out to be a catalyst for my transformation. A few years later, when I was starting to get sick, I sat down and started asking questions about life and the universe that I'd really given up on from about the age of 12, when I think rational science and materialism convinced me that they knew better than anything religious that I'd been informed about to that point. And I was a very closed-minded atheist until I was facing the journey into death. And then I started to do study, research, apply my historian skills to this journey of self-discovery that humanity has been on for so long, and a transformation began in me. The shamanic soul within me woke up. I met the goddess, I met the ancestors, I became conscious of the multiverse that we're part of and our purpose and reason for being here. And then I survived. Although I lived for 3 years at death's door, I didn't leave the body. I came back and then came out into the world sort of to seek my spiritual family, really, my tribe ever since. I've been seeking and finding my tribe ever since. First place I found them actually was in a field in Dorset, where I met Al at an event called the Queer Pagan Camp. That was such a breakthrough moment for me, meeting 100 queer witches, shamans, druids, fairies, healers, energy workers, and realized that I wasn't alone in this incredible transformation that AIDS had taken me into. There was a tribe of people out there to be found. And that's been my journey ever since, through the Radical Fairies, connecting with that community all over the world and being part of establishing a Radical Faerie Sanctuary in Europe and a Radical Faerie community and the UK over the last 15 to 20 years.
Thank you. And Al, what about you?
So I was brought up as a radical Christian, but then I moved away from the church in my late teens And in my early 20s, I started going to a place called Greenham Common, where there was a women's peace camp for many years. And there I discovered the connections between sexuality and spirituality and politics. I became a pagan at that time. And the protests involved pagan action, singing chants, making magic to make people invisible when they went on the base, making magic around, pulling the fence down. So that was really my introduction to how magic could be used practically. And the connection between my spirituality and my sexuality has always been there since then. I spent quite a long time in largely women's communities, identifying as lesbian, and those communities were also spiritual communities. We did a lot of spiritual rituals and camps, and also a lot of actions that involved our spirituality, that involved magic and singing and so on. And then around 2000, I discovered Queer Pagan Camp, and first came across this concept of queer as an identity that's sort of outside the box, as multiplicity of genders, multiplicity of sexualities. And gradually I started to embrace that more, to the point where I now identify as genderqueer rather than female. I learned a lot through Queer Pagan Camp, made lots of connections, like for many years. All my friends, connections, lovers, social groups really came from that. And that's now moved into lots of smaller groups, like Queer Pagan Camp itself is still going, but smaller. And there's lots of other groups that are sort of offshoots from that or have been influenced by that. So during that time, I became more aware of energy. I've been experimenting and learning more and more about energy recently. I've become a devotee of Kananos, who's a deity of the woods. And I now use the term priestess as a gender-neutral term for somebody that leads rituals. So it's been a very gradual thing, but it's become deeper and deeper as I've gone on, as I've connected more to the land, connected more to the beings of the land, to the trees, to the beings, the deities. So they've also been teaching me as I've gone along.
And both of you are producers of the Queer Spirit Fest, which happens in England. And I wonder if you could tell us the story of how the Queer Spirit Fest came to be.
Sure. Shall I take us right back to those early days, Al, when we would enjoy the Queer Pagan Camp summer festivals with about 100 people, and then go home, and I, for one, would have incredible dreams after those camps. I would have the most vivid dreams I could ever remember having since childhood, where the camp had expanded into a festival with lots of zones, performers, ritual, and hundreds of people. So I felt that was the route. The route was right back there then. And Al and I talked about this over the years, and I think at about the same point, about 4 or 5 years ago, we suddenly thought, it feels like the energies are coming. Al, do you want to add to that?
I think it was a dream that we both had about bringing different groups and individuals together, so that it wasn't just one organisation, it was bringing in all the different tribes together. And when Queer Pagan Camp first started, it was really the only queer spiritual grouping in the UK. But now there's so many different ones. And so I think that's partly why about 4 years ago we sort of thought, right, there's enough now, there's enough groups around, there's enough individuals around to actually bring this together and actually make this happen.
And how many years have you been doing it now?
This will be our third festival. We did the first one in 2016, second one the following year, and then we took a year off.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure if there was a pattern of every other year or what your cadence was with that.
That's an intention, but after the first one, the momentum was really high. The first festival was a very exciting breakthrough moment for several hundred queers. I'd say on a parallel with the breakthrough that 100 of us had at the early Queer Pagan Camp, experiences how magical it can be to be in sacred space in nature. with other energy working queers. So that, we kind of, the experience was so heightened for everybody after the end of the first year that the momentum was there to roll straight away into a second festival. So we were glad to get the second one under our belt, because the second outing of something could always often be a challenge, especially after the first one has been such a high. So we got the second one under our belt. It took a year off, and now the energy is really strongly there for a festival this year, the excitement.
And can you set the scene for us, like what the space looks like and what the experience is like and what attendees experience while they're there?
So it's between 400 and 600 people on a piece of land, and we bring in all the infrastructure into that. So we've got obviously things like toilets, showers, cafes. We've got a big marquee which has performances every lunchtime and every evening, and then discos, DJs after that. And also during the day, the marquee sees like bigger workshops that need a bit more space. And then we've got 3, 4, 5 workshop spaces as well. One of them is completely a sacred sexuality space. There's a meditation space, there's a campaign space, and there's another couple of workshops that do all sorts of different workshops. We do big ceremonies with the whole site, with everybody that wants to come, so several hundred people doing big ceremonies together. That's really beautiful and really exciting part of it. We have a big fire where people can be around. We do lots of drumming, singing. To add things, Shokti?
The workshop program is now up online on our website. I think we've got an incredible lineup of offerings, some witchcraft, gong baths, healing workshops, shadow play fighting. The Sexuality Temple's got an incredible lineup. There'll be more political discussions. There'll be daily heart circles, healing circles. There's something like 40, 50 facilitators giving their time for free to support this development for the queer community. It's also, I'd say as well, it's everything you would expect at a summer festival is there in miniature form. Where like a baby summer festival, you walk in, it's like any summer festival. You've got everything going on, and you've got 24-hour welfare area. We have the whole thing is stewarded and looked after properly and efficiently. Things run according to schedule and timing. There's a detailed program telling everybody when to expect what to happen. So people could come and really plot their way through the 5 days or however many days they come for and have a beautiful adventure. Big part of it, of course, is just the chance to meet several hundred other queers of all backgrounds and sources coming together in the name of celebrating our creativity, our spirit, our love, our community. It's a space unlike anything else that's manifested before, we think.
Now, you've both mentioned a fair amount of connection with Buddhism and witchcraft, but I wonder if this is also open to people of other spiritual or religious practices as well.
Yeah, it's open to any queer people, any LGBTQ people who want to explore spirituality in any way, in a wide sense. So some people might not have a particular spirituality, they just want to come and be on the land and be with other people. Some people might have a very firm path, and that's fine. The workshops and performances and so on will be from people from all different spiritual paths. Another thing I'd like to emphasize is that we're really big on inclusion. We really want to include as many people as possible. So that includes people's paths, it includes people's ages. So we have a kids area that helps, has activities for young people. We have an accessible camping area so that disabled people and people that might need a bit more support can camp in a particular area and get supported by the welfare team there. We want to make it accessible for people in terms of money, so we have a concession rate, and we also have the possibility that people can come and volunteer in return for a ticket. We also give tickets to migrant groups, people that can't afford to come for various reasons. So, we're always thinking about how to make the whole thing as accessible as possible for everybody.
Yes, we want this to be a community feel, and it is a community feel. It's like a 5-day gay pride with rather less intoxication. People are coming to get high on nature and connection. We don't have a bar, we don't have rules about what people do or don't do, but this is really not a hedonistic space. This is a space that people come to, for sincere connection. That is, of course, what opens us up and makes the energy flow. Gay life has plenty of hedonistic spaces on offer. We're not trying to recreate those. We're trying to create something completely new.
And Shokti, you've written a little bit about the spiritual inheritance of queer people and reclaiming mystical power. I wonder if you can say a little more about that and how you weave that intention into the festival.
Yeah, I'm super excited that the festival is giving a platform for this kind of conversation, which is frankly a conversation that's happening now all around the world, gradually infiltrating. And I would hope that we can be an example to the world of queer spiritual power in action, living the reality of the dance with nature, the dance of hearts, the dance of sexuality and spirituality, being a living example of that. Because if we look historically, transsexuality, sodomy, same-sex love, they've always had associations with spiritual realms. Throughout Christian history, it's the controversy, but pre-Christian history in Europe, pagan religions of the ancient world were incredibly queer. The only reason we don't know about this is because the Christians have spent so long wiping out the evidence and the memory of this. But if we take the example of the two spirits of the Native Americans, and only since the 1990s have the two spirits in America stood up and said, we are the two spirits, and taken the word Bedash and thrown it away. The word Bedash that was applied to this breed of shamanic workers, the word Bedash means a bottom. It was a French word for a bottom. This word for a bottom in buggery became their label for centuries. We in Europe, we have the same history. In Africa, in Asia, the whole world has this same history. The Native Americans are reclaiming it, and I believe they stand as an example for the rest of us. But we have to dig deeper into our history here in Europe to find the evidence about the Galais priests of Cybele, the Gala priests of Inanna Ishtar in the Middle East, about the rites of Dionysus. One thing I think that really every queer should know, that at the time Jesus was born, the whole of the Mediterranean world, religion was run, was high camp, was very sexual, was run by the trans, the queers, the holy ones. But even the holy ones in the Bible, it calls the sodomizing priests in the temples the holy ones. But when this got translated from Aramaic into English, it became sodomites. And in modern translations, it's male shrine prostitutes. There's this whole level of connection between sexuality itself and spirituality that we have the opportunity to open the door to hear and reclaim.
Well, that also leads me into my next question for you, Al, a little bit more about the work that I know you focus on, which is sex magic, and particularly using that for healing the land. And I wonder if you can share more about that, and especially how you bring that to the festival.
So I do workshops under the title This Land Sex Magic, and that connects the sexual energy with the energy of the land. So as Shokti was saying, I believe that sexuality and spirituality are completely interconnected, and that particularly in Europe, we lost the heritage of that because of the Christianity, because of the Inquisition. We lost our heritage of connecting our sexual energies, connecting our sacredness to sexuality. And in the other places like the East, that wasn't lost so much. So some of those traditions have been taken on by people in the West and adapted. So basically in the work that I do, it has different strands. One is the strand of connecting us back to the earth, because I feel that all the damage that we do to the earth and we also do to ourselves, at the moment we're heading on a path that is destroying the earth, and at the same time we'll destroy ourselves. And to reconnect us back to the earth is one of the important things that we can do at this time. So that's one of the strands. Another strand is to connect with the sexual energy of the earth, of the air, of the fire, of the water, to connect with the energies of our bodies. So we're not just physical bodies, we're also energy bodies, and learning how to understand that energy in a way that I believe is our birthright. I believe we used to know how to do this. We used to know how to work energy, how to be aware of energy. But again, we've lost that sense of it, and we don't really have a sense of how energy works. And that's something that I feel like we're learning. So my workshops are also places to relearn that. Another big element in the workshops is working around consent, learning how to have a culture of consent. Again, the culture that I live in is a non-consensual culture. So many things are done to people have to do without consent. And so trying to reclaim ideas of consent in sexual connections has to be seen within a much, much broader term, much broader situation where our consent is taken away from us as children very, very early, and we have to relearn what consent means and how to consent to things, how to ask for consent. That's a big thing that I bring into the festival, and lots of other people also bring that into the festival, because in many parts of the LGBTQ community, again, there isn't that awareness of consent, and we're trying to bring that in so that, yes, it's very beautiful to have hugs with people, to have connections with people, but we need to make sure that that's consensual and that people are happy with that. So those are different strands. And then there's also the strand about queer sexuality. What is queer sexuality? How we move away from the sort of heteronormative paradigms into finding our own world of sexuality and what that means.
It's interesting, Al, to hear you talk about that consent and also about the ways that your work ties us into our relationship with the environment. And it's making me think about this idea that just came to mind, and I don't know if this is something that you talk about in your work, but having consent as far as our relationship to the earth. I just thought of this phrase of ecological consent, and it makes me think about, like, if we could cultivate more consent in our culture, the way we relate to other humans, would it change the way that we then relate to the earth and think about, how is what we're doing to the earth going to impact the earth in the same way that we may be more mindful to think, how am what I doing to another person impacting them? So I don't know if that's something that you weave into your work, but it was just an idea that I had as you were talking.
Yeah, definitely. That all makes sense. And we can learn to listen to the earth as well. We can learn to talk to the earth and listen and be aware of what is consented. Yeah, we can imagine that a lot of the things that we're doing to the earth at the moment is completely unconsensual and not okay, but we can also redevelop that connection that many tribal cultures have had with the earth of actually understanding what is needed and what is asked for.
So as we start to wind down a little bit, I wonder if each of you can share with us a person, practice, or experience that has supported your queer spirit to flourish.
Sure. I'd like to offer a person and a practice. Person, I'd just like to throw in a quotation from one of the fathers of the radical fairy movement, Harry Hay, which I think is a very relevant thought for our festival and the work that we're doing. And it goes like this: beautiful, lovely sexuality is the gateway to spirit. Under the organized religions of the past, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, there has been a separation of carnality, or shall we say of flesh or earth or sex, and spirituality. As far as I'm concerned, they're all the same thing. And what we need to do as fairies, and I say as queers, is to tie it all back together again. And the practice I'd like to mention is London Queer Spirit Circle, Full Moon Drum Circle, that I've had the privilege and joy to be facilitating for now almost 15 years. It was my dream when I started that it would become a sort of known fixture on the London scene, that on the full moons the fairies meet somewhere and drum and make magic. And of course the first few years it was slow, it was a bit intermittent, but then it's very good energy came our way and we got nurtured, and suddenly in the last few years we are growing and growing and growing. We do almost every full moon now in London with nearly 100 people coming for an incredible, energetic, emotional workouts, connected time. It's a portal into the work that we do in queer spiritual community that I'm having the joy to manifest at the centre of London, in Vauxhall, the centre of the gay nightlife and hedonism. We pop up there. This practice supports me because constantly more and more wonderful people finding the work that we're doing, and people who are looking for an alternative to the mainstream commercial energies of gay life. And we're offering it. It's real.
And Al, do you want to share about an influence that has supported your queer spirit?
Yeah, I think it has to be Queer Pagan Camp. It's supported me now for nearly 20 years, and it's still going. It's a bit smaller than it used to be, but it's still going. It's going to be on the edge of Dartmoor this summer at the end of July. And people there and the whole ethos there taught me so much about what queer is, challenged my assumptions around gender, got me to experience different experiences around gender and around ritual, and about how to create rituals and situations that are not heteronormative, that make no assumptions about gender, that don't genderize the sun, the moon, the earth, that have that openness. Queer Pagan Camp, we create rituals together in an inclusive way. So we find ways of making ritual together that everybody can join in with, that everybody's happy with. And that's a really beautiful thing to be part of, and has been such a big learning for me. And I continue those traditions in all the work that I do.
And you've both referred to Queer Pagan Camp, and I wonder if, since I've not heard of it, and maybe many other listeners haven't either, can you differentiate what's the difference in terms of what happens at Queer Pagan Camp versus the Queer Spirit Festival?
The festival is a broader remit where it's really for the queer community, the LGBTQ community, who are exploring spirituality, and there are many ways to come together and create a cauldron that's visible to the whole world, as opposed to a very focused Queer Pagan Camp where you can go and really learn deeply and intentionally about ritual and pagan magic. We don't go as deep into it in that kind of thing in the festival, but it manifests at the festival in the skills that we've learned through doing that energy work, manifesting now the quality of large-scale ceremonies that we're able to hold with hundreds of people, for example.
Well, and wrapping up, can you share the details about how people can learn more about the Queer Spirit Festival and when and where it will be?
Yes, so it's between the 14th and 18th of August, and it's between Milton Keynes and Northampton, which is sort of quite central in the UK. And the website is www.queerspirit.net, and there you'll find all the details of performances, workshops of the festival, and also the details of how you can volunteer if you'd like to volunteer for various jobs that we still need doing. In return for between 4 and 6 hours a day's work, you get a ticket to the festival. So yeah, all the information is on there. There's also Facebook event.
Facebook event and a YouTube channel. We have a YouTube channel, Queer Spirit Festival, and on that there is a 30-minute documentary made for Czech television at the last festival. It's a professionally made documentary about what goes on. It's a very good insight into the energy there.
Great. Well, I will have all those links on the show notes so people can find them there. And lastly, Al, I know you wanted to mention your book that came out last year.
Yeah. My book is called Queer Deity, Sacred Slut, and it talks about lots of things that are important to me in my life. It talks about healing, it talks about sexuality, it talks about relationships, it talks about queer deities, fooling, identity, and it's a mixture of talking about my experiences and talking about the results of those experiences in terms of my ideas. It's called Thoughts in Process. It doesn't dictate ideas. It just says, these are my ideas and you might like to think about them. And yeah, you can order that off the website. And the website is www.alhead.co.uk.
All right. Well, thank you both for being here. And I hope that your festival is a great success.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nick.
I work with many queer folks who struggle to get their needs met or who suffer from having their boundaries violated by others. Because you may not have been cared for the best, you might have a hard time identifying your needs. Or because you have been violated or bullied, you might not completely understand where exactly your boundaries are. If you'd like some help exploring your needs and building more resilient boundaries, head over to my website and download the free guide, Needs, Boundaries, and Self-Care Support for Queer Folks. This is a short introduction to help you start to shift and change your relationship to yourself and others, and to feel more safe and resourced day to day. So just head over to queerhealingjourneys.com/needs to download your free guide today. I look forward to supporting you on your path. To find the resources we discussed today, find the show notes at thequeerspirit.com. And if you enjoyed the show, remember to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. This will help us reach and support more queer people all over. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.